everyone, welcome back to Teens in the Kitchen with Halifax Public Libraries. My name is Emily, and today in this beautiful Sackville Library kitchen, we're going to be making some chicken tenders from scratch, if you can believe it, and we're also making some delicious roasted vegetables. Chicken tenders especially is something that a lot of people crave and want to go run out to the drive-thru to get. But this is something that you can make so easily in your own kitchen, a lot more healthy, a lot more affordable, and you can actually customize the flavor to your taste. We're also doing potatoes because, you know, you want some chicken and potatoes. That's a really classic combination. So we're going to roast some potatoes and squish and double cook them. So they're going to be crispy, soft on the inside, and also have a nice garlicky, herby flavor. And we're also going to be roasting some carrots, so we have a nice balanced plate by the end. So we're going to get started by preheating our oven, and so we're roasting at a little bit higher temperature. We're going to start at 425 Fahrenheit, so I'm going to go do that. And the next step we're going to do is just to spray our baking sheets. So we're going to use one sheet for our vegetables and one for our chicken tenders. So I always like to do both foil and spray, just to make sure that they don't stick, and also it makes for a really easy cleanup when you're done. So you don't have to scrub away at your pans, you can just pick up the foil and throw it in the garbage. So I'll just do a nice thin spray on our pans and put them aside. And so we're going to start off by boiling our potatoes for 8 minutes because it will make them nice and soft before we roast them. It takes a long time to roast potatoes from raw in the oven, but if you do boil them first, it makes it a lot easier. And we can also mush them before we roast them so they get this crispy, delicious texture to them. So I'm just going to go ahead and put 1.5 pounds of potatoes in our pot. And I'm going to fill the pot just over the potatoes to boil them. And the reason that we're putting in cold water in the pot is so all the potatoes come up to the hot temperature at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up my pot and put it on my stove on high heat. And it will take about, like I said, 8 minutes once it starts boiling for the potatoes to be soft enough to drain. And I'm going to put it to high heat and just let it do its thing. And once I notice that it's starting to boil rapidly, that's when I'm going to put on my timer and make sure I'm testing the potatoes after 8 minutes. So we're also doing roasted carrots. So carrots are a very nutritious side. They have tons of vitamins and nutrients and also lots of fiber. And that orange color is something that you should get into your diet every single day. It's called carotene, and you'd also find that in things like squash and pumpkin, and something that you definitely need in your diet regularly. So I'm cutting my carrots into nice big chunks that are about half the size of the potatoes, and you'll notice that my carrots have kind of a pretty diamond shape. So I'll show you how to do that. It's actually called a round cut or a roll cut. So first you just take your washed carrot and you can peel it. I like to peel the bottom half of my carrot first. I find it a lot easier to just flip it around when you're done and finish off the bottom. And once you're done peeling, all you need to do is put your carrot down on your cutting board and roll it as you cut it. So that's going to create those pretty diamond shapes that you see here. So I'll just cut off the little end here and start on my diagonal, roll the carrot and cut again and keep going just like that. It's very quick. You can do it in kind of one fluid motion. And something else we're putting on our veggies is garlic. So as you know by now, I absolutely love garlic. So I'm adding 5 cloves to these potatoes and carrots. I find that it really adds something special to the roasted veggies. So if you watched the last video, you'll probably remember how to peel your garlic and how to mince it, but I'll just do a little recap. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the end off the garlic. Give it a little tap with the heel of my knife. So you have to be very careful with this if you're doing it for the first time. And then the peeling should come right off. It's pretty easy. And once you have your garlic ready, all you have to do is slice it, turn it around, and mince very thinly. And the smaller the piece, the better, because it will distribute so nicely through the vegetables. So once you get all of your cloves minced, you can put that aside and we can bring everything together. Alright, so I got my garlic all minced up and got a little cleaned up here, and our potatoes have started to boil. So it only took a minute or two because there's not that much water in the pot. So once your potatoes start to boil, you can add some salt. And we're not going to add a crazy amount of salt, but we are going to add a nice pinch because potatoes will actually absorb the salts that you put in the water and start it off with a really great flavor. So we have the timer going and we have our garlic and carrots ready. And so once these are ready, we're going to toss them in some oil and saute the garlic and the herbs and put that on top as well. So it's going to be a really quick and easy veggie and potato side. All right, I just tested the first potato with a fork and it's soft, so I know that they're ready. It's been about 8 minutes, so I'm going to turn off my burner and I'm just going to dump these in a strainer in the sink. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually saute the garlic and the herbs in some oil in the pot, and that way that really brings the fragrance out of the garlic and out of the herbs. So before we toss everything with that, they're going to already be tasting pretty great. So to make sure there's no water left in the pot before I add the oil, I'm just going to take a cloth and wipe it out because oil and water doesn't mix and it will do a lot of spattering if I skip that step. So just grab a kitchen towel and give a quick wipe at the bottom of the pot, and you can turn the burner back on. This time I would say medium heat will do. And I'm adding in about 4 tablespoons of oil, which is about a 1/4 cup, and it seems like a lot of oil, but actually we're probably not going to have most of that on the veggies. It will kind of drip off as it roasts, but it's nice to have enough to cover it initially. So I'm going to put the oil in the pot and wait for it to get nice and warm before adding the garlic. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my garlic. You can hear that sizzle when you add it in, which means it's immediately starting to cook. And I'm adding in about a tablespoon of herbs here. And I'm just going to use a wooden spoon to stir it around. And this isn't going to take very long at all. So as soon as you start to smell the garlic and the herbs, you can turn the heat off. So it's been about 2 minutes and the garlic is really fragrant. It hasn't browned yet, but it actually smells exactly the way it's supposed to. So I think that's time to turn off the heat because we don't want to burn the herbs or the garlic. And then we're literally just going to toss our carrots and our potatoes into the garlicky oil and then put them onto the sheet, onto the baking sheet. So in go the carrots, and I'm putting our potatoes in there as well. And give them a nice toss around with a wooden spoon. So when everything looks shiny and it has those, like a little bit of a coating of oil and herbs and garlic, you know it's time to put it on your sheet pan and pop it right in your oven. And carefully grab your pot. And a good chef tip is to always pour things out of a pot away from you. That way nothing will splash up on you or burn you while you're pouring. So I'm going to go ahead and dump these out. And there's going to be a little bit of oil and garlic left in the pot, and that's completely fine. And I'll show you why in just a second. And then the fun part, you can actually take a fork and just squish down your potatoes. And you don't have to put too much pressure, you just want them to burst open. And like I said, they're going to have that nice crispy edge by the time they're done cooking. Alright, so once you have all of your baby potatoes bursting open and ready for some extra flavor, you can actually take the remaining oil and delicious herbs and oil and garlic out of your pot. And you can either use like a spoon, or sometimes I like to use a pastry brush to add that bit of extra flavor to the potatoes. Alright, so everything has a little bit of garlic, herb, and oil on it, so it's time to roast it in the oven. About 15 minutes usually will do. So as soon as the carrots are tender and you can pierce a fork through them easily, you'll know that everything's ready to come out. Alright, now that we have our veggies roasting in the oven, we have just enough time to bread and set up our chicken tenders, which are going to be really delicious and really easy to make. And like I said, they're even better than what you would get through the drive-thru. So why not try it at home? So whenever I work with meat, I make sure to use gloves. And the reason I do is because there's less likely of a chance that will cross-contaminate the meat with things that you would eat without cooking, or other equipment that you might use on salad or something you might eat without cooking. So we want to make sure anything that touches the chicken gets thoroughly cooked. So as long as you have gloves on, it will be easier just to take them off when you're done with the chicken and you don't have to worry about it. So this recipe we're using 2 large chicken breasts, and if you see with the chicken breast there's actually a piece that kind of hangs from below, and that's the part that's called the chicken tender. And so we're just going to cut that piece off and use that as a guide of what we're looking for. That's about the size that we want all of our chicken slices to be. So when you're cutting up your chicken, you would want to put your point pointing to the right, and use your knife and your claw shape with your other hand and cut about 1/2 inch thickness slices all the way through. And 1 large chicken breast would be enough chicken tenders for 2 people. So if you're feeding your family of 4, 2 chicken breasts is plenty. Especially matched with the carrots and potatoes, it will make a really healthy and filling meal. So when you're slicing your chicken, make sure you slice against the grain. It will be a lot more tender that way, and it will just be easier to eat. So slice all the way through. And if you cut your chicken too thick, it might not be done in the amount of time in the recipe. So make sure you have it about 1/2 inch thick. So that's about the width of your thumbnail. That's a good way to go by. So I'm going to go through, and it's going to make about 8 slices. And if you have any bits on your chicken, like any fat or anything like that, you can cut that away if it's unappealing, but mine looks pretty good. I'm going to set my first chicken breast there and start on my second. And another quick step I like to do once I get all my tenders ready, or my chicken fingers you could call them, is lay them out and just do a little sprinkle of salt on them, because that helps to build the flavor. So we're also going to put a little bit of salt in the breading, but if you put it on the chicken itself, it's going to be flavorful and juicy the whole way through. So I'm going to remove my gloves and just take a little pinch of salt. Like in the last video, I said if you use your fingers and wiggle them with the salt in between, you can really control how much salt you're putting on and in your food. So a breading station usually has 3 spots. The first spot is for the flour, the second spot is for your egg mixture, and the third spot is for your breadcrumbs. So the reason we do it in this order is because the chicken actually has a little bit of moisture on it already. So if you add the flour, it dries it out a bit before adding it to the egg. The egg attaches itself to the dry flour and makes kind of like a thick coating. And then when you put it into your breadcrumbs, it really has something to stick to, that thick coating that it gets from the egg and the flour. And that's how you're going to get that really crispy, nice chicken finger that you're looking for. So for our first station, we're just doing 1/2 cup of flour. I'm just going to put that right in there. And that's it besides the seasoning for the first one. For the second one, we're just doing 1 egg, and I'm just going to crack that in there and add a little bit of water. And get a little bit of water, about a tablespoon. And then I'm going to beat the snot out of it. That's what my chef would always say in culinary school. So when you're whipping an egg, you'll notice that the egg white is kind of snotty, where it's kind of really thick and goopy, and you want to get that out. So the more that you whip your egg with the yolk and with the water, the more thinned out it will be, and the more evenly it's going to coat your chicken. So really whip it together, and it's okay if you make a little bit of a mess. Just take your time. And once you notice that it no longer has that string when you hold it up, you know that you beat the snot out of it and it doesn't have that kind of slimy bit to the egg anymore. And the last step is to add your breadcrumbs to the pan. So we're actually using panko breadcrumbs today, and the reason I really love to use panko breadcrumbs is because they have big flakes and they're very crunchy. So panko breadcrumbs are actually really affordable. It's about $3 for a large container like this, and we're only using 2 cups for this. So I'm just gonna measure that right into our pan. And the next step I'm going to do is actually add some spices and flavoring into my panko and into my flour. And so like I said, you're gonna have flavor at every level, and it's really going to build that nice consistency when you bite into it. So you can add literally any spice that appeals to you to these breadings, but I'm going to be adding a bit of paprika, some Parmesan cheese to give it that nice tangy flavor that is really satisfying in a breading. Some onion powder to give it a nice oniony flavor, and I also have salt, pepper, and garlic powder. So those are my personal favorite spices and flavorings, but like I said, you can use absolutely anything you like in this mixture. So I don't really measure it when I cook at home, but I would suggest for you to start out with about a 1/4 teaspoon of each type of spice that you're using, and experiment later on. If you thought it had too much of this or that, you could really change it around. So I'm going to grab a little spoon and add it to our mixture. So I'm going to start with the paprika and add just a tiny bit to the flour and a little bit more to the breadcrumbs. For the Parmesan, I think I'll just add it to my panko and add maybe about half a teaspoon. For the onion powder, I would say about half a teaspoon would be good. For the flour, maybe a little more for the panko. Pepper, I really like spice and like a strong flavor, so I'm going to put about a 1/4 teaspoon in each. And for the onion powder, about half a teaspoon. For both. That's just my personal preference. And of course you want to add a bit of salt, but not too much to your breading. So about half a teaspoon will do for your panko and maybe a 1/4 teaspoon for your flour. And then really just mix it together so it's completely incorporated with the base. So that just takes a minute. All right, so now we're ready to bread our chicken. And so I'm going to move the spices aside and then we're just going to get started. So it's a pretty quick process. And like I said, it's something you can do while your veggies are in the oven, so it doesn't take too much time at all. So I like to have a separate fork for each station, just so it doesn't get too messy and too goopy while you're going from one to the other. And so the way I do it is I actually use the fork the whole way through instead of using my fingers, because I like to keep my fingers clean. So I'll show you the first piece. All you have to do is drop it into the flour and coat both sides, and just make sure even the edges are coated as well. And then when you're happy that it's completely coated with the flour, you can just shake off the excess, because if you have too much flour stuck to your chicken, it might get a little bit goopy. So once you're happy with that, you can drop it into the egg, and you can use the side of the plate if it's a little stuck, and put it back in your flour. Then with your egg fork, you can just flip that again, pick it up and let the excess egg just drip off as well. And then just drop that into your breadcrumbs. So with the breadcrumbs, you actually want as much to stick to your chicken as possible. So I like to kind of bury it in the panko and press it with my fork to make sure it gets really stuck onto the chicken, because the more panko that sticks on to your chicken, the crunchier it's going to be and the more tasty it's going to be. So just lightly lift it up once you're happy with the way it looks. If it still seems like there's some empty spots, you can put it back down, pack it on nicely, and then lightly lift it up and just drop it right onto your pan. Simple as that. So that's our first chicken finger ready. And once you have the process down, you can so easily just go one at a time with each piece of chicken until you're completely done. And by the time you're done, your veggies will be done and you'll be ready to switch out the pans. And that's as simple as a home-cooked dinner, straight from your hands. So I'm going to do the rest of this chicken and then we're going to catch up at the end. All right, so I finished breading my chicken tenders, or my chicken fingers, whatever you want to call them, and they look like that. So they're looking pretty good, and it's good to keep them quite separate from each other. And my carrots and potatoes should be just about ready. So let's take them out and do a poke test to see if our carrots are tender. All right, so our potatoes and carrots look really great. As you can see, some of the potatoes have some crispy brown bits, which means that they're going to be very flavorful. And the carrots are very soft when you pierce them with a fork. So this just took 20 minutes, and your sides are completely ready and great for a family of 4. So I'm just gonna switch it out, put my chicken fingers in the oven for the same temperature, and these will cook for 8 minutes on one side. Then you'll flip them with a pair of tongs and cook for another 8 minutes. So while our chicken fingers are finishing in the oven, I'm going to show you how to make a really easy dipping sauce. You can always just eat them with ketchup or barbecue sauce, but I really have a favorite dipping sauce for them. And it's as easy as mixing honey with Dijon mustard, so you have some honey mustard to eat them with. So to make this, all you need to do is to mix 1 part honey with 1 part Dijon and mix it all together. And I usually do about 2 tablespoons of each if I'm doing for my family. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So that's about 1 and about 2 tablespoons of honey. Make sure you scrape it up the side so the jar doesn't get too sticky. And I'm also going to do about the same of the Dijon mustard. So Dijon mustard actually has a really nice tang to it, and it has kind of like almost a spicy flavor. So if you're not a fan of spice, you might want to skip this dip, but if you like trying new things and you like something with a little bit of a tang and a little bit of spice, you'll really enjoy this dip. So I'm doing about 2 tablespoons full of mustard with our honey. And another way to kind of mellow this out so it's not quite as spicy is add the same amount of mayonnaise. So that makes it a little bit creamier and a little bit less rich. But if you really like the strong flavors, this simple sauce is going to be just for you. So as you can see, it really mixes together. And it's like they were made for each other. It really mixes well together. And this will look similar to what you get in the drive-thru when you ask for honey mustard. So it's really just that simple. So our last final 8 minutes are done and our chicken fingers should be ready, but we're going to take the temperature to make sure, because we want to make sure the inside of the chicken reached a safe temperature so it's completely cooked through, and that temperature is 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're going to use our trusty food thermometer, and I'm going to show you how you can do that at home, and I'll also show you a way you can tell if you don't have a thermometer. So I'm going to grab those out of the oven. So you just take your food thermometer and turn it on, and you should see a C and an F on your thermometer. So make sure that the number on the screen says F, and then very carefully with the thermometer, just pick the thickest piece of chicken. So probably this one looks the thickest to me, and you want to insert it almost sideways so you can get the very middle of the chicken and see what the temperature is. So you just have to wait a few seconds for it to register, and already we're going past 160, so we know that they're definitely cooked. So if you want to try another piece that looks just as big and you might be worried it's not finished, just insert your thermometer halfway through, and if it passes 165, you're golden. And if you don't have a food thermometer, you can wait a few minutes for them to cool down a little bit, but all you need to do is to break your chicken open, and if the inside is completely white and the juices are running clear, you don't see any pink at all, you know that your chicken is done. So these are crispy, they smell great, and they're ready to eat. So I'm going to put everything on a plate, and I'm going to show you what it looks like at the end. So here's your final product. So you got your crispy chicken tenders, your soft roasted carrots, and your crispy, flavorful potatoes, and a nice little dipping sauce to go along with it. So this is a great weeknight meal. It has all of your food groups and lots of veggies too, so you know you're getting a really healthy plate here. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe as much as we do, and we'll see you in the next video.